Morning everyone, welcome to the shop. Today we're going to be talking about something that could have saved me literally tens of thousands of dollars had I bought it 5 years ago. I'm going to start this off with a line of logic. What do you think your car is worth? In my case, that thing, I probably have, not what it's worth, but I probably have $15,000 into it. So spending $500 to make sure that I don't get screwed really should be more of a no-brainer than it is. Insurance is good and all, but I've been in at least 3 accidents where I had insurance, but the other person, there was no way to place blame. One recent example of this was I was in my E46 sometime after I'd bought it. I was driving down a 4-lane road on the far right lane, and there was a truck in the left lane that had kind of not been going the same speed as me, and then they suddenly decided to turn right. But my car was there, so they turned right into the side of my E46. We were both doing about 40 miles an hour. They simply could not see me out of their horrid lifted Silverado. And they just claimed that I turned into them. And Kansas is a no-fault state, which, if you don't know what that is, look it up and don't live in one. It's absolutely terrible. But it meant that since I didn't have full coverage, my car was not getting fixed, and my rates went up because it was shared fault. It was absolutely insane. Another example is the accident that I can't really talk about that is the primary reason that I have back issues. And all of this could have been avoided if I had one of these guys. This is the BlackVue DR900X 2-channel, which means that this is a dash camera, but it's actually 2 dash cameras. 2-channel means you've got 2 channels, imagine that. Huge thank you to Blackbox My Car for sending me this. I've been wanting to do a video about dash cams for a while, but I've been procrastinating and it's cost me a lot of money, so let's get around to doing this. So we're gonna get this installed, we're gonna see how good it is, and then we're gonna talk about different options for dash cams for your car and how Blackbox My Car can help you out. This is kind of a mess that's kind of spread out all over my workbench, but here's more or less what you get. You get the main unit, and they have lens caps, which is adorable. You have the rear view unit. You have 2 wiring options. This one is just the plug it into your cigarette lighter option, or there is the hardwire option, which is what I'll be opting for a little more of a integrated look. You've got the cable to connect the front and the rear cameras together, a nice branded trim tool, as well as a branded 32GB micro SD card, which is interesting. These washers are not part of it. That's stuff from another project. My workbench is a mess. If you go this route, I guess they kind of expect that you're going to be sort of snaking it along your dashboard, so they give you these nice little adhesive clips, as well as some more 3M tape. I believe if this comes off. This is 3M VHB, so it is the good stuff. That should hold very strongly to windshield glass. And then of course this is angle adjustable, very nice. And then you've got a series of ports here, micro USB for connectivity, a barrel jack for the DC input, a coaxial cable port for the rear, and then a Wi-Fi button. And then if we pop off the cover here, you can get to the micro SD card slot. So we're just gonna leave that on for now. On the other side, looks like there's a light sensor or something under there. And then on the back you have indicators. You have indicators for recording, GPS and Bluetooth connectivity, LTE or Wi-Fi connectivity, and I think that might be a speaker. I keep dropping the lens cap. And then there's some holes for cooling all over the unit. This thing does record, as it says, 4K UHD, so there's quite a bit of horsepower packed in this little thing, as well as the radios for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connectivity for use with an app on your phone. The little unit, a lot simpler. Looks like it's got an LED there. There's where your video goes, and there is the lens cap on the lens itself. This one is also angle adjustable, and it's got lots of fun peely plastic on it. Naturally, when installing something like this, the first step is going to be to make sure that the surface is nice and clean. For good adhesion, I'm going right here on the passenger side of my best friend's ride, and also the passenger side of my rear view mirror, because as you can see, there's a lot of plastic here. If I mounted it here, it'd really kind of obstruct my view. So we're going right here, right underneath my toll tag. The general plan here is to run the cables along the windshield, down the A-pillar, and into the fuse box down in here where I'm going to use an adafuse to reversibly get it switched and permanent DC power as well as a ground. And then the instructions show the video cable running away from the power cable. You typically don't want to mix power and video, so depending on how hard it is to run these cables through the A-pillar, I'll probably go the other direction with the data cable all the way to the back, and then I'll stick the rear camera back there. And I'm not looking forward to taking apart this much of my interior, especially on a car that hasn't been taken apart before, but it is fresh enough that hopefully stuff's not gonna break. Also, it's cold in here. I sold my Ranger, now I don't have a way to get diesel for my heater. I changed my mind, and for a couple of reasons. First of all, I realized that all this big black plastic, that's just going to obstruct the view of the camera going off to the sides. And also, I won't be able to see lights on the back of it. I'd like to put it to the left of the rearview mirror, but then it would block the rearview mirror. There's not an optimal place for this in this car. Like, if it could fit up here, that would be great, but it doesn't. It's just a little bit too bulky with the way that this mirror is. Stupid early BMWs with their thick boy mirrors, but I think that'll work okay. Yeah, it's honestly, looking at it from like my actual perspective, it really doesn't block more vision than the mirror itself does. So I think that's actually going to be fine. This adhesive feels extremely strong. You also want to make sure that this is somewhere that is going to get cleaned by the windshield wipers. You really wouldn't want it to be looking through that. This part pretty much could not be easier. I think I might use one or two of those little sticky clip things on the glass to hold this wire in place. But other than that, it's just take the wire, give it a push. There's usually a pretty decent amount of a gap here on the front edge of these headliners. Make sure that you wash your hands before you do this, especially if you have a gray headliner like me. Otherwise, you'll get it dirty. And I think that the next step here, I'm not sure, I think there might be room for me to run this down the A-pillar without necessarily taking the A-pillar off. But then once I get down here, this being a German luxury car, the panel fitment might be a bit too good for me to snake the wire through there without removing this panel. So I'm just going to take my trim tool, and I believe the access I need is under this airbag thing. Do be careful if you do take off your A-pillar, because there are airbags in modern A-pillars, and you definitely don't want to interfere with the operation of those. So I'm going to see if I can figure out how to get this off. There should be a fastener under there, and then I can at least pull back, if not remove, that A-pillar cover and figure out what I'm working with. Running cables in cars is one of those jobs that doesn't seem to get any more pleasant the more that I do it. So, one fastener right there, and then this guy popped right out, just a few clips there, and then kind of a slide back and wiggle sort of deal. That came off. Popped this off. I don't think I actually needed to do that. You can just go back for now. Oh wait, yeah, this panel over here, pried that out and ran the cable down through here and poked it out back here where the fuse box is. At this point, honestly, I would like to cut this wire to length, but they do have these nice fuse holders on here, and I kind of don't want to destroy their hard work, but at the same time, that is a lot of wire to bundle up in the fuse bay area, but I guess I'll just do it for now, if my focus would ever work. So I'll just bundle this up and put it in there for now, and then I can re-terminate it later depending on how I feel. For now, I want to get a few small zip ties just to make sure this doesn't wiggle around or come loose or anything. Make very sure that you do not pass in front of this airbag. When I run the wire to the back, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do actually. I guess I'll need to try and just get it way up in here, because you don't want the airbag to catch on that cable when it blows. I've even seen local stereo shops zip tie things, and they've put a zip tie around that airbag, which obviously that's bad. That's what you don't want. And I'll have to go to the store to get the actual adafuse and whatnot to to put this in there. And actually that add a fuse will include a fuse, so I wonder if I really want these inline fuses after all. Questions for later. We're going to move on to disassembling the other side of the car. I did decide I'm going to run the cables on both sides of the car. Why? I still don't understand the logic, but that's what I'm going to do. Also, pulling this this little felt weather seal thing off made this a whole lot easier as well. I just hope it all goes back together smoothly. Running the second, the cable for the second camera is going. Look at this monster of a seal. Holy crap, that must be how they managed to make this open frame window coupe so quiet on the highway. Okay, well, I've been at this for a while. After doing a bunch of Googling trying to figure out how to get this B-pillar trim off, I actually couldn't really figure it out, so I ended up just doing the pry and tuck method all around here, ran it up around here, took I kind of took the fastener out of this, then pried and tucked around here, ran the wire up along here, and then we've got the unit mounted to the back glass there, made sure it doesn't interfere with the retractable sunshade. Then I coiled up all the extra wire and I'm putting it here in this really complicated third brake light module area. Hopefully that all fits. I'll probably have to do a little bit of finagling, but that was the best place I could find to coil up all the wire, and as a bonus it gives a nice place for the wire to route. So I'm going to start putting stuff back together. Really just popping trim pieces back into place, you know, put the screw back in the C-pillar and put the trim back around the door, and then we just have to plug in the power wiring and we're pretty much done with this. Honestly, that wasn't bad. My advice is if you're going to do a 2-channel like this, maybe look into professional installation. See if there's a stereo shop around you that has good, you know, find some place that you trust, because a lot of disassembly had to happen here. And if you're not confident with car interiors, knowing where to pry and pull and how much you can pull, rattles in a car aren't fun. Like, it can ruin your whole experience depending on how much you care about that sort of thing. And an additional $100 to $200 on top of the purchase price really isn't all that much. If you're just doing a 1-channel and you're just going to, you know, run the power wire down, I mean, it really all depends on how nice you want the fit and finish to be versus how much you want to take apart your car and risk breaking something. You can just dangle the wire down and plug it right into your 12-volt socket if you want to, and that also makes it easier to move from car to car. If you have a whole bunch of cars, you don't keep them for very long. I intend on keeping this car for a long time, and like I said, I'm fairly confident in my ability to mess around with car interiors like this, so I went this route, but it's not for everybody. So let's get this back together and then we'll look into the power wiring and what goes on in that fuse box over there. And I just realized I've had the doors open on this car all day, so I hope my battery's doing all right. So for the power wiring, I'm going to be using these Littell fuse add a fuse connectors or add a circuit connectors, mostly because they're reversible. Don't permanently alter any of the car's wiring. They just crimp on and then they plug in, and I'm going to plug them in according to this diagram that I found, and I'm not sure where I'm going to ground to yet. What's that? That looks like a potential ground location right there, actually. It's working. There's my wiring down there. You can see I did ground it to that thing, then I've got those two. So I'm just going to bundle this up and stick it in there somewhere where it's not going to rattle around. And I guess I'm going to drive around. I fiddled around with some settings, turned off the voice alerts for power on and starting basic recording, because I don't want to hear that every time I get in my car. The status LEDs are more than enough status for me. So I'm going to go use this for a few days, and then I'll come back with my thoughts and a little bit of a deeper dive into some different features. One thing that I really appreciate is this thing supports H.265, which is a way more compact video recording format. Some older computers might not be able to play it, but if you've got a decent modern computer, it should handle it just fine. And then of course there's companion apps for PC and phone. But that's probably why this thing has all the cooling in it, because it takes quite a processor to encode that H.265. So I'm going to bundle this car up and I'll see y'all in a few days. All right, so I've been using the dash cam for a few days now, and I've kind of had a few minutes to tweak it, look at some settings, look at some events, and figure out exactly, evaluate it fairly. And I haven't been in looking at dash cams in quite a while. Here's a look at daytime footage out the front camera, and then here's daytime footage out the rear camera. Now that's pretty good. This thing does record 4K 30 FPS in the front and 1080p out the rear, and even the rear quality is pretty darn good, especially to someone who hasn't been paying attention to dash cams all that much lately. What really impressed me though is here's a look at night, and then at night from the rear, and then here's at night with some rain. That's really good. That's what really astonished me, is the nighttime visibility is phenomenal. Now, one thing that I would change here is the micro SD card. I'm getting 1 to 2 days of recording time before it loops back around. I do a lot of driving though, and my parking settings were set not how I'd like them. I would opt for a 256 gig micro SD card to go along with this, especially if you're spending this kind of money. Definitely worth it, and that is the max that it supports, is a 256 gig card. It's just that, a 4K plus 1080p stream, that takes up space pretty quickly. A few changes I made to settings. I disabled all the audio alerts except for it'll still beep when it detects something, and it'll tell me if it detected an event while in parking mode, but I didn't need it telling me that it was switching between parking mode and driving mode, though some people might want that additional confirmation. I also way dialed back the sensitivity on the accelerometer. That thing was recording an event every time I hit an expansion joint by default, which, your mileage may vary. If you've got a Cadillac that rides super smooth, it might not pick that stuff up, but for me, that's what worked best. I also turned off the LED for the rear camera. It just kind of got a little bit annoying there in my rear view mirror all the time, seeing that white LED. And then for parking mode, I switched it to time lapse. And what that does is the entire time that your car is parked, it's recording a time lapse. And then if it detects an event, it will record that event at normal speed. This massively helped me from filling up my SD card as rapidly, and just kind of makes a bit more sense to me. One thing that's funny though, I mentioned that this thing uses H.265, which is a really good video compression algorithm, but it's kind of processor intensive. And in fact, it's so processor intensive that it iced on the car the other day, and the dash cam actually melted a circle in the frost around it because it was sitting there recording in parking mode, which is hilarious. That video is pretty darn good quality, and obviously video quality is important, but it's also worth mentioning some of the other features that this particular unit has, like 136 degree front and 116 degree rear viewing angle, event file protection. So if it records an event, then it keeps that from being overwritten when the SD card fills up, so you can go back and get it later even if you didn't notice it right away. It reboots every night, which is kind of an interesting feature, I thought, especially coming from the IT world. It is designed to automatically restart itself every night just for stability's sake. It's got GPS. If you have the app on your phone and you go look at the footage, it'll actually show you on the map moving along, which is kind of nice for telemetry later on. Also, if you don't want to use the app on your phone, you can take the SD card out and put it in your computer and use a program on your computer. And then if you change settings on the camera, when you put the SD card back in, it will read the settings off the SD card and make those changes on the camera, which is a pretty nifty feature if you don't want to fiddle around with Wi-Fi and your phone. I also thought I saw a light sensor on the side. What that actually is a proximity sensor. You can use that to turn the microphone on or off if, for example, you're saying something that's potentially sensitive and you don't want recorded, or you can use it to record an event manually if, you see someone do something stupid that didn't necessarily record an event. It also has a backup battery in case power gets lost completely, and it's a supercapacitor instead of lithium ion, which I really appreciate because lithium ion has, fire hazard, especially for something that's going to be sitting in direct sunlight a lot and not great longevity. Supercapacitors are far better technology for this application, so I appreciate that they did that. And then there's the add-on LTE functionality for the cloud stuff, which is super cool. And one annoyance that I had that's more of a problem for me and my specific situation is iPhones don't love these peer-to-peer wireless Wi-Fi networks, especially when you also have wireless CarPlay. I have to make sure that my head unit is off in order to connect to the device because my iPhone keeps reconnecting to CarPlay, which kicks me off the Wi-Fi connection to the camera. So that's not a fault of the camera, that's more a fault of Apple not letting me ignore CarPlay or potentially a fault of my head unit's overly aggressive connection settings, which is super useful most of the time, but not in this case. Now, if you're not looking to spend $500 on a dash cam, I have been given a few recommendations from Black Box Your Car, who, by the way, their customer service is fantastic. They're a US-based company and all that jazz, so that's great. In the $150 to $200 range is about as low as they recommend going. Anything beneath that, you're getting into the really cheap Amazon stuff, and I have some experience with those, and it's just not worth it. You're basically buying insurance for your car, and you don't want to cheap out on your insurance coverage here. But in the $150 to $200 range, they recommend the Voifo A119 V3, and a friend of mine actually has this. He has one of these in his Ford Escape. No real issues with the video quality from it. It's not as good at nighttime as this BlackVue is, but it's still perfectly passable during the day. You can read license plates. I definitely recommend that thing. There's also the Voifo A129 Plus that they recommend. Their thing there is all the money is in the video quality. Other areas, not as nice as the BlackVue, but the video quality is probably where you want your focus to be initially, and then fill out the other features later. If you go up a little bit, you've got ThinkWare's products like the F200 Pro or the FineView GX33 or GX1000. There, you're kind of getting onto the moving beyond video quality a little bit. ThinkWare has really good parking mode protection, and FineView has AI protection features, so you can kind of choose your own adventure. What sort of fancy functionality do you want on top of your good video quality? And then above 300, you're getting into the really good stuff. The more expensive BlackVues and ThinkWares, like the ThinkWare Q or U1000, or the BlackVue DR750X, or the DR900X, like I have been reviewing in this video. That's where you get into your 2K and 4K video quality. Buffered parking, where it's constantly recording and then only saves when an event happens, cloud functionality, that sort of thing. So there's different tiers to this, and obviously it gets more fancy as you go up in price, but at $150 is about where you start, and for $150 to protect your car, it's kind of a no-brainer. I'll probably look at the A119 for my E46, and maybe some of my other cars, if I probably New Insight if I get one. It just makes sense. Every time that an accident happened to me, I would have people yelling at me, why didn't you have a dash cam? You should have had a dash cam, and I should have. So if the DR900X or any of the other dash cams I've mentioned have tripped your trigger as something that you'd be interested in, you can use the link right here or in the pinned comment below for 5% off an order over $100. So support brands that support the channel and protect your investment with a high quality camera stuck to your windshield. Also, there's endless entertainment potential in actually being able to show people that stupid idiot that slammed on his brakes down to 40 miles an hour in an 80 zone because they thought they saw something. Always fun. Thanks for watching.